Hello, Podfam, and hello, Rachel. How are you today?
I am good, Laura. We have a functioning recording system today.
Excellent.
So
This is
I'm
so much better
thrilled.
than last week.
You know, I'm just glad that we're back on our Zencaster and we're just doing it because I kind of missed it. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's been rainy every single day this week, which kind of like not very fun, but I'm hoping the sun is coming soon. But how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been rainy here as well, and I went out for a walk because there was like this brief moment of sun, and then it started
nice.
to rain. I was getting like chased by a black cloud, and then as soon
Excellent.
as I got home, it started to hail.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it didn't last very long, but like it came on like really fast, like just kind of a downpour and then some hail.
Yeah,
And then it got nice again. So, funny weather right now.
it is funny. I'm a little bit offended that it hailed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just there's no time for that
No,
right
no, we
now.
don't need that stuff.
No, we don't. But what are you having to drink?
Today I'm drinking a very episode appropriate tea, and that is stress reliever.
Oh, yeah. That sounds good.
Yep.
I need that.
Yep.
I need that. Yeah. Well, I've got my immunity booster tea.
Oh, that's also a good one. Need some support.
Yes. Yes, it's like not quite a stress reliever tea, but it kind of acts in the same way, I like to think. You
Hey,
know?
yeah, got to have that support for your soul, right? Especially with what
Yes.
we're going through right now.
Yeah, so this one's gonna be fun, guys. Everybody buckle in. Not sure if we're gonna cry yet. I guess we'll find out, but we're gonna be talking about financial anxiety. Are you excited, Laura?
I'm so excited. And this is another one where I believe we said it in our millennial
Yep.
episode where we hope there's something helpful that comes out of this. But, I feel like we just need to talk about some of this stuff because
Mhm.
so many people are going through a hard time right now. And, we always feel like we're just treading water and
Yep.
never getting anywhere. And especially with what's happening, it sometimes just feels hopeless to reach goals and,
Mhm.
fulfill your dreams. And I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people can relate to that right now.
Yep, because just the cost of living is just so high and just keeps on climbing, and it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
It's great.
literally, you think you're just getting a little bit ahead. You get maybe a promotion at work. But then
Mhm.
with inflation and everything and the housing market, you're like, wow, I am no further ahead. And maybe now I'm even a little bit further back than I was before.
Yep, and that hurts. But I think let's start with just a general definition of what financial anxiety is. So essentially, it's characterized by feelings of worry, fear, or just general unease when it comes to your finances. I think it's important to mention that, like, this anxiety does not just have to be triggered by a lack of funds, though that's a very common factor. You could still be able to meet all your obligations and even then some and still feel like it. And I want to make that point because I think a lot of financial anxiety advice that I've been seeing, and I know you've been seeing, is centered around this thought that people who are feeling this way are either spending carelessly or don't make objectively like a higher income. And I just don't think that's entirely true.
No, I think you're exactly right there. I don't think it matters how much you make, regardless of that. You can feel anxious about money. And
Yep.
just from my research, I kind of came across some common feelings
Yep.
that were coming up and things that people were saying. And those were, feeling behind others, never going to be okay, a failure, insecurity. It was these words that were coming up, and really like a lot of them have nothing to do with money. You can feel like that in general. And
Hmm.
I think when we struggle financially, it just fuels this fire of maybe some anxiety that you already had about some other things. And I think being safe and secure is a major factor.
Definitely. I agree with that. And I think as well, too, feeling like you don't make enough is definitely a common factor with this. But I think a lot of it, too, is your childhood beliefs
Right.
around money, how you were raised. So, like how did your parents bring you up to feel about money? Like, was it talked about? Was it not talked about? Did your parents struggle with a lot of debt? Or did they struggle with overspending? Or were they just lower income in general? Like, it's something that's so internal.
Hmm.
I feel like anyone I've talked to, and maybe it's just like our millennial generation, has expressed concerns about money. And I feel like times like this where it just feels like we don't know where that ceiling is going to be yet, where like this increasing cost is going to end, that it's just like no matter how much you're making right now, you're like, oh, this is a really scary time. And it's just causing that internal anxiety that I think we all have to certain degrees to just escalate.
Yes, and I just kind of want to go back to your family comment there for a
Hmm.
second because that was very like the tangible things, right? You know, like do we have enough?
Yes.
And a lot of it I think also stems from, the language. You had mentioned that either money, wasn't discussed with the
Hmm.
children, or
Yep.
maybe it was, but it was always negative, like,
Yes.
"Oh, we never have enough, that's too expensive." And I think that created a lot of fear, especially for our generation, just because we've lived through so many market downturns and, crisis after crisis in our short lives, um,
Yep.
that it just
It's great.
yeah, it just kinda keeps creating this really unstable foundation for us. So we then draw back onto, okay, what were the lessons we learned as children, and we
Hmm.
kind of carry it forward.
Exactly. So, why don't we just go into like how you can know if you're experiencing financial anxiety and then maybe talk a bit about our own personal experiences?
Sure.
All right. So, I'm going to throw out some questions to our listeners here to help you determine if you are feeling financially anxious. The first one is, are you avoiding your finances by not checking your bank accounts or your budget?
That is a big one.
Yes,
That is a
I do
huge
that.
one because I know when I'm getting uncertain, like I am someone, every paycheck, I am in my bank account. I know exactly, I have a system of where money goes. And frequently in between pay periods, I will be on my bank
Hmm.
account and I'll just kind of know, like, okay, that's there, that's there, that's there.
Yep.
And when things are tough, I don't do that. I
Same.
almost like not actively avoid, but I
Hmm.
don't really like search out my bank account, and I am so much better than what I used to be, especially when I was in like university and didn't know fucking anything about money and didn't care.
Yep.
You could ask me what was in my bank account and I'd be like, "I don't know." No idea,
Yep.
right? So, that seems to be like a default that
Hmm.
I have been aware of, that like, okay, if something's not right with money, I know I kinda check out a little bit because 'cause
Yeah.
I'm scared of what it's gonna say. So, that's a hard one to overcome.
It definitely is, and I can relate to that, to this one as well. I kind of go back and forth where I will be a bit obsessive about it and checking it like multiple times a day, even though there aren't going to be any differences really, unless a bill payment happens that day. But it's been more recently where for a long time there, like I knew this is how much I was able to save every pay period. This is how much my car costs. This is how much groceries usually are and such. And just as those amounts have been changing and that predictability has been lost, it's not that I like avoid it, but I've just thrown up my hands and I'm like, it is what it is. And I
Yep.
kind of have like given up that control. Like, I'm like, well, like, I don't know if I can save any money anyway, so I might as well just like do what I want, which
I
isn't a great thing.
I love that you said that because, like, I feel we all get there sometimes. We're like, "Well, I'm
Mhm.
fucked either way, so I might as well have new shoes."
Yes, exactly. And some of the things that I just said there lead into my next question, and this is where I was before this situation just got messed up over the last few months. And it's, are you hyper aware of where your money is going? I have been that way.
Oh,
I
I am hyper aware right now, and I
Yes,
have, like, a
to a
running
T.
list in my head of, like, "Okay, I need to pay that, I need to pay that, I'm getting money from this," and,
Mhm.
like, I instantly know every single dollar movement happening.
Yeah, even if it's like a little like $50 refund or something, you best know. I know that it's coming.
Yes.
And then another one is, are you, and I know we're all kind of worried about this, but almost to a point where it's like debilitating, but are you like severely worried that you're going to run out of money? I don't really experience, like, I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where like I am concerned about making ends meet sometimes,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say that that's like my particular anxiety.
Yeah, I can definitely understand because there's so many
Yes.
people who, don't have good job security or, home security, insert whatever type of security. If that is uncertain, I
Yes.
think having that fear of running out of money or not being able to make ends meet is so valid. Absolutely, it's
Yes.
valid. And I
Especially after the last 2 years too, where, like, I
yes,
feel like the feelings of job insecurity have just escalated so significantly because of what we've all kind of been through
right.
over the last 2 years, where there was a lot of layoffs and people not being able to work.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm grateful to say that, like, right now, currently in my life, I
Mhm.
do feel like I do have job security.
Yes.
Knock on wood here, guys, just in case.
Knock on wood, we're doing it right now.
Yeah, yeah, so, like, I kinda know that, like, okay, that next paycheck is coming and it's like the train's gonna keep moving, that kind of
Yes.
mindset, but I do know, like, when I was younger and I didn't have that same kind of job security. Like, obviously, I was very fortunate
Mhm.
to not have as much responsibility as I do now. But yeah, there were times where, I probably didn't really have enough money for groceries. I just remember being in university was really tough. And I did
Yeah.
have a part-time job, but I was not financially educated enough
Mhm.
to give myself a good opportunity to be financially secure, even though like I could have been.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that
Yeah,
for
so I
sure.
feel like that's kind of aside from financial anxiety, that's more just lack of financial literacy, and the best thing
Yes.
that ever happened to me was waking up from that and being like, "Oh my god, I don't know anything. I better learn."
Yeah.
Because that really changed my whole viewpoint around money, and I think becoming more financially literate
Mhm.
has lessened the amount of financial anxiety I feel.
Yes. And, that's a very tangible action step that people can take too, is just seeking out educational content about that because there is so much
So much. Yeah,
available
and
that, you don't have to go to a financial advisor.
no, you really don't, not in today's day and age. And, always, if you need a professional, I think that's a great option, but there's so much free content out there.
Mhm.
And I know it's super overwhelming. Like, you don't know who to listen to. Just pick someone with common sense and try it out to see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, try something else.
If you feel like you're really being heavily sold something, maybe
Don't buy
maybe
things.
like
Don't buy
maybe
things.
just take a step back, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. And, I think the secret is, like, once you find someone you like, stick to that plan, right? Like, don't
Yes.
be jumping around from one plan to the other because I think that causes a lot of stress as well,
Mhm.
because maybe you're on the tipping point of being successful in one plan and then you change and you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh god, I'm so behind because I don't follow, like, this mold."
Yeah.
So yeah, like, find someone you like, make sure they have a good head on their shoulders, and stick with it and then just see if you get
Mhm.
results, that's really all you can do.
That is excellent, excellent advice. And I'm just going to jump into my last question here, which I do think really applies to me. And it's, do you obsess over how much you make and think if I just made X amount more, everything would be better? Now, I'm going to
Oh
preface this.
god.
I am going to preface this because I have worked in the position where I did not make very much money. Like I'm pretty sure after everything, like it was significantly
You
less
made, like,
than
less
minimum
than
wage.
minimum wage, so you were on
I did.
salary, but once you factored in, like, everything deducted, the
Yes.
hours that you worked, you literally made less than minimum wage.
Yes. So I do want to preface this that sometimes this is the case where, having an increase in income, it does make things easier. And I say this from experience.
Mhm,
And I just again want to preface this here. Like with everything we say today, like I do acknowledge we are both coming from secure employment spaces.
mhm.
Like we are in a privileged position and we know like there's people that have it a lot better, there's people that have it a lot harder. We just want to have a conversation about this. But I think part of the problem is like what I've noticed is I have the same, and like this, like maybe I'm going to go back a few months before everything went crazy. I had the same anxieties about what my money was doing then as I did before
Mhm.
when I wasn't making as much. So I think what I'm trying to say here is like, it's the grass is greener on the other side
Right.
thing, where it's like, oh, well, if just this happens, I'm going to be happier or things are going to be easier. But I think that there is an internal work that needs to be done with this anxiety. Otherwise, I do think it will stick with us no matter what income level you have.
Yeah, and a lot of that is, we're thinking like, okay, if I could just make this amount, I'll be fine. But in
Yes,
reality, a lot of people fall victim to lifestyle inflation.
that is the thing.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, you were making one salary for 1 year and you're like, oh man, like I'm just paying my bills. I don't have anything extra. And then let's say you get like a $10,000 boost. You're like, yes, I have extra cash. But then all of a sudden, you're buying more things and you're right back where you started. So,
I feel
y-
very
yeah.
seen right
Yeah,
now.
we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Um, that's just what happens, right? Like you have a little extra cash.
Yeah.
We're awful about thinking of the future as human beings, we live
Mhm.
very much in the now. So instead of being like, I'm gonna save this for retirement, you're like, I could get a new car, right? Like that's just kind of how our brains work. And I kind of want to go back
Mhm.
to maybe finding someone with a methodology of good practices for your finances, and if you can kind of stick to something where it's like a split of so much
Mhm.
is for your expenses, X amount is for investing, and the other amount is like emergency fund or like
Yeah.
what do they call them? The FU fund. So that's like your fund money. I
Yep.
think that is really important to subscribe to. And then it's not going to
Yes.
be perfect. Like you're going to have moments where you slip up and have a spendy month. Like, frick, I do it all the time.
I've been
Um,
having like a spendy 2
Oh
months. It's
gosh.
not
Not
nothing
on
to
purpose either, like, I'm like, "I'm not doing
no.
anything different." Life is literally just plowing over me. Um,
That and also that one thing I said where I'm just like, "Well, I'm screwed anyway,
right?
so
You're like, "I'm
fuck it."
screwed anyway, let's just do it full-heartedly." Um,
Full send.
yeah, yeah, so try and get, like, a framework of just automatically when you get your paycheck, hey, there's your expenses covered first, you have to cover your expenses. And then how you do that final breakup of like, you know what, every paycheck I'm going to put, I don't know, $100 into a savings account or into like an investment account. And it comes right off the top. So I don't even see it. I think those are fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, and then you are putting money away for like a rainy day or the future. And you're not even thinking
Yep.
about it. Right. I think that's important. And then by the time you get leftover of like what's left to spend, that's all
Mhm.
you have, right? And the rest of
Yep.
your money is safely tucked away.
Precisely. Shall we discuss some of our experiences and feelings back in the past and now?
Sure. I kinda, like,
Sure.
brought a few of mine up already, so Rachel, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I think just to some like in the past, I was in university and I did have some support when I was there. But when I got to my job in the city where I was, making my independent salary and I was trying my best to support myself, I was having financial anxiety because of the amount of money that was coming in. I felt like I needed to be making more so that I could save, and not even just save more, but just to like, cover all my expenses and like maybe go out for dinner once a month or something. That I was feeling so anxious about getting ahead and, making like checking off some boxes that I decided to take on extra work. And I was serving on the side all weekend. So I put myself in a position where I was working 7 days a week. And this is a bone that I have to pick with a lot of financial anxiety advice out here. And I know you can spring off this with me is, often when you're reading, it's like, okay, well, if you feel like you're not making enough, like start a side hustle or serve a day a week or something. And I'm like, I think that's great if you really just want to set out and make extra money. I don't think that you should have to take on another job to live.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because I know frequently on this podcast we've been like, down with side hustles, and I do just wanna clarify where we're coming from. It's not that we don't support people having, like, a side job or, like, this podcast is literally a side job for us. It's a labor
Yes.
of love, but, like, it's something that we want to do.
And we do it genuinely by
Yeah,
choice.
we
It's
genuinely
not
do it by choice, and it's not where, like, what I hate is when one income is not enough to support one person. That's where I
yes.
get really pissed off, just how our world was, and you think back to the '50s, I mean, whole family lived off one income, and then, we had dual income houses growing up as kids,
Mhm.
and now as singles or couples, young families, like, all of us have 3 fucking jobs,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'm not going after the passion projects. I know some people, they're like, but, like, I love what I do." And I'm like, That's
Mhm.
fantastic. I love that for you." I'm just more
Yes.
mad about, like, it should not take more than one income to live one life. That's
It
where
should
I'm
not
coming
be
from.
something that you have no other
Yes.
choice other
Yes.
than to do.
Yeah, because for some
So
people, like, where are they gonna find the time? Like, if you have, like, a single mother who works full
mhm.
time, has her kid, and then has to go do another job, like,
Yeah.
that's crazy, and I know that's out there, like, people are actually struggling with this, and
Mhm.
then now they're having to pay for babysitting or daycare, which is just eating away at their extra money that they're bringing in, and it's just this vicious
Mhm.
cycle that no wonder they have financial anxiety, like, frick, I would.
Or it's a couple who they can't afford childcare, but they, going back 2 years ago, or not even that long ago when the lockdowns were happening and the kids couldn't go to school, there were parents having to willingly leave their jobs and lose that dual income to take care of their children
Yeah, yeah, like
because they couldn't afford daycare,
exactly, or,
or I
like,
guess
yeah, well, not
in-house
in that
support at
case,
that time.
yeah, like, in that case,
It was
daycare
in-house
was not
support
an
at that
option.
time, yes.
Uh-huh. But still,
Yeah.
I find it kinda crazy that, the cost of childcare is literally
Mhm.
one person's income, and so
Yeah.
you have so many people leaving the workforce because they're like, "Well, why bother if, like, my whole paycheck is going to childcare? I might as well just be the parent who stays home
And takes care,
and
yeah.
takes care of them," and then maybe that person, had dreams for their
Mhm.
career, and so once their kids are in school, like, they're gonna feel behind. And,
Yeah.
oh, look at that on our list of feelings of anxiety, feeling behind others.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, there's just vicious circles here, and I know we don't have a lot of answers, but, like, we just need to air some grievances about how broken our system is.
Yeah, tying it back to that period of time, I think where a lot of my anxiety came from was, comparison, where I felt like and not even comparison to, like, specific people, just to this leftover imprint of what a young adult life should be like, like, young, new into the city kind of thing.
Mhm,
Where, like, I think that where a lot of this comes from is, like, you might like, with some minimum wage work and stuff, especially, like, when it's just, like, one person, like, I could cover my stuff, but I didn't have a life.
right.
Like, I wasn't able to go for dinner, and I wasn't able to, like, even go to a museum, honestly, sometimes because all my money went to transit, rent, and groceries. And, that's another thing, and not more advice of like, oh, identify where you can save. And if it's like a popular advice that I don't really like, where it's just like, oh, well, if you're trying to do this, then like, why are you going out for dinner? It's just like to go out and have a life.
Sorry, I tried to be social.
So I think that's kind of what I was struggling with at that time, was just feeling like I was on this never ending hamster wheel of just trying to pay for my basic necessities
Mhm,
and still feeling like I was falling short. So had to give up all my time in order to get just a tiny bit ahead. Where now I think it's a similar feeling. Like now, like I can cover all of my needs and such, and I'm really grateful for that. But I think it's what you said earlier, where it feels like you get a little bit ahead and then inflation happens,
mhm.
and then you don't feel as ahead as you thought you were going to be. And I think I'm just dealing with that feeling where it's like, have we really left that time of our lives, you know?
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And my experience with financial anxiety is very similar to yours, Rachel, because, for me, university was a time where like I didn't really know better.
Mhm.
So the fact that I lived like little, I don't know how much I made at my part-time job, maybe like $350 every other week. I
Yep.
think that's what I lived off of. And I was very fortunate, like, during the summertime, I would work my ass off and I would, like, get my tuition paid for.
Mhm.
With the summer job, like, I could pay for my tuition every year,
Mhm.
so I was very fortunate that way. And, like, I will be fully transparent, I did have some financial help to pay for tuition,
Yep.
but then, I had to change living situations and ended up in a more expensive apartment, and that's what I had to get a student loan for because, like, I literally couldn't afford to
Mhm.
live. So that was really tough, but, like, I didn't how do I wanna say this? Like, I didn't really have a whole lot. I was not, worried about too much because I didn't have a whole lot of responsibilities except for making sure my apartment bill was paid for. But
Mhm.
then when I went into the working force and, had to pay for more things because I was, just growing up, and with that comes a lot more responsibility.
Mhm.
I was making, similar to you, Rachel, just an amount of money that didn't really cover my basic expenses. And I was
Mhm.
just desperate for finding ways of how to make extra cash. And really, it came down to it of just like, I don't wanna do this my whole life, like, I'm, like, so tired
Yeah.
of having to work, like, 10 different jobs.
Mhm.
Not an unrealistic number, people, that's fairly accurate number for me if you listen to any of our older episodes.
She's not
I'm
lying.
not
It
lying,
actually
I'm not
she
lying, I hadn't
monetized every hour of her day.
exactly, I knew how much I was making every hour, it was not healthy. Does that stem to financial anxiety? Absolutely, it does.
Mhm.
And, I had to do a
That ties back to the obsessing over how much you make
yes.
a little bit.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
That's an illustration of that question right there, guys.
Perfect. Love being an example. Um, but yeah, like I just like I knew like I gotta change something. I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I'm not even
Yeah.
making enough to live.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I did kind of put myself in the hole briefly to change jobs, change careers, but at least now I'm like, okay, I can afford my basic expenses. Very grateful for
Yes.
that because so many people cannot say that.
Mhm.
And now, just with how the world is, I'm just like, man, I feel like if this was just a few years ago, I'd probably like almost be a homeowner. Like it would not be so unattainable that it would actually be a dream of mine. Cause now I'm just like, that would be fantastic. But like, is that going to happen for me?
Mhm. And it's just like, could I afford a mortgage payment? Sure. Could I afford everything else that comes with owning a house
Nope.
on top of it? Absolutely not.
No. No, and that's just how it is right now, like, just with how expensive it is for us to fucking live. So many, people of our generation and other cohorts, like,
Yeah.
that's no longer a dream of ours because we're like, "Well, that's just so unattainable." We're lucky to get a nice
Yeah.
apartment with parking.
Yeah, like, it feels almost like now it would be like some fantastical, like, Disney plot line.
Oh, for sure.
Young millennial buys a house. It would be like,
Oh my
"Oh, whoa.
god.
How? What?
It's
How?"
like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
No, it's
that's kinda
hard.
where I'm at, very similar to you, Rachel, is just like, you finally
Mhm.
feel like you took a step ahead and the world
Yeah.
took 5 steps back and you're like, okay,
You're
not
like,
as far along
"Cool."
as I was hoping to be."
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've talked about lots of like this stuff a lot amongst ourselves, and it's just we used to know exactly what everything cost, and we knew exactly what the breakdown of our monthly bills were, and now it's just like, whoa, gas, perfect example. Our cars used to be $45, now they're like 90 to 100.
Oh god, it literally doubled. Literally
It
doubled.
did. It did, and
and it's not
I
slowing
don't
down
know.
either.
Yeah, and I think it's been, like, I guess going to, like, something that I'm going through now, it's been a bit tough where, maybe necessarily I don't have to do this, but to just make it feel a bit easier on myself, there's been things that I would do for myself
Mhm.
that I'm like, "Hey, I think I need to take a break
Yes.
from this so that I get a break from that cost." And it's hard, like, just for transparency, everybody, like, I'm, gonna take a break from singing lessons
Mhm.
for a couple months. I would go to a singing lesson every single week for 4 years, and this would be the first time that I'm like, okay, I can't. And that's not easy. And I know that there's people out there having to make way bigger sacrifices than that. And it hurts my heart.
Yeah, it really does, especially when you start thinking about people who can't even make their basic needs,
Yeah.
and that's just wrong. That's just wrong on so many levels.
Hmm.
We should all have food to eat, water to drink, a safe place to sleep, and that's just not
Just shelter in
shelter in
general.
general. Like, that's just not a reality for so many people, and just with how things are going, that list is going to grow, and it's
Hmm.
absolutely like horrifying. And
Yep.
with that, Rachel, like I kind of want to venture into the failed advice for alleviating financial anxiety, because like
Yes,
we seriously set out on a research mission with this
we did.
stuff, and we're all
Hmm.
like, every time we talked about what we were finding, we're like, this is the most god awful advice I've ever heard of.
Yes.
It's so out of
Yes.
touch, so out of touch. And
Yep.
Rachel, do you have any, or do you want me
Oh,
to share
I
some?
have I have a few. I think I kind of interwove two of them earlier, so I'm just gonna go into like my third one. Also, you'll love this, but my on my notes, I do like by bullet points by talking. And do you want to know what this part of my notes is called?
What's that?
Bones I have to pick about financial anxiety advice.
There's a lot of bones.
There is. So, a big one that I've seen is like, it's like, oh, seek out financial advice from a professional. Friends, who's recommending that? That costs money. The problem is a lot of us are feeling like we don't have any money.
That is part of the fucking problem. We don't even have
It's just like
money.
it's just like how? So, I think like it is sound. Like I do think it comes from the right place, and maybe like I don't know, 5 years ago would have been valid. But right now, like, that's just not in people's budgets.
No, it's not. Um,
Not for the average person.
yeah, exactly. And so, like, another thing I kept coming across, okay, so I already talked about getting the side job, and so we've already gone there.
Yes.
And then the other one that you always see is like, you need to cut back. And
Cut back.
friends, there's only so much cutting back you can do. And actually, I saw this poll going around the other day. I think it was on YouTube. And YouTube, yeah, it must have been YouTube. And it
Mhm,
was, with the rising cost of food prices, how many of you have either A, changed what you're buying at the grocery
mhm,
stores, B, skipped a meal but fed your children, or
mhm,
C, the whole family skipped a meal?
mm.
And let me tell you, there were check marks on all of them.
Oh my
So
god.
this is the reality. No, like how much are you supposed to cut back? People
Mhm.
have to eat. You would literally have to eat to survive.
Yep.
And like, we're fortunate that we're in Canada, so a lot of our medical stuff is paid for.
Mhm,
But like, oh my god, down in the States, there are literally people who are dying because they can't afford their
mm,
prescriptions. And I heard a stat, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm really sorry, but it was like 10,000 people a month
mhm.
were dying because they couldn't afford their prescriptions. And I'm not sure, I don't quote me on. I know it was 10,000. I'm just not sure if that was like per month.
Yeah.
I need to find that and check back in with everyone.
Regardless
Regardless,
regardless of the timeline, that's too many.
regardless, that is too many, regardless of how, like, per month, per week, per year, that's too many people.
And that's the thing is, like, I mean, we're not from the States, but, like, you know, it shouldn't come down to, like, if you have the money to cover a prescription or the money to cover your groceries, you should not have to pick
No.
between one or the other.
No, you shouldn't. You should be able to have both because that's a human right.
Yes, it is.
And now I think with housing, like, there's so many tent cities popping up as well
Mhm.
because people literally either have to, like, live out of their cars or find alternatives because they can't afford rent.
Yeah. And that's, you know, assuming that you're not gonna get chased out of one of those places if you were in a tent city.
Yes, exactly.
To be told to get off of the park grounds and stuff. That's just that those stories and stuff are make me sad.
Oh, they're awful.
Um, they're awful. But the next one, and this one is near and dear to my heart because I live in a rural area, is they say just take public transit. Don't drive. Walk maybe. I live a 30-minute drive from well, I live about a 15-minute drive to the nearest town, a 30-minute drive to my job. If I was going to walk, it would take me an entire day probably to get there. And there is no public transit. There is no option
No,
for me
no.
where I am. And it's just like, you know, I do love public transit. I think it's great, but I don't like when that expectation is put onto somebody when they are struggling with financial anxiety and such because it's just like that's just bulking everyone together as in you live in a place that has public transit and kind of villainizes you if you need to drive
Yeah.
just to get where you need to go. And also, like, yes, I live in a rural area, but other places where this is a thing is like suburbs.
Mhm.
Those aren't very walkable. And like, there might be good public transit or there might not be. Or like in our nearest main city, there is not a transit line that gets you all over the city. Like, there are parts of the city that are not accessible by transit.
Yeah, like, I live on the edge of the city, and my job is on the other side. There's no bus taking me to work.
There's no train
There's no train.
unless you wanna do, like, a bunch of random
It would
connections
probably
that would
take me
take you,
6
like, 3
hours to
hours.
get to work.
Yeah. So, you know, I do understand where that advice comes from, and, you know, I think that it can save a lot of money, and I think it's great for the environment, but also, like, going back to that time where, you know, I was kind of making a minimum wage salary that really was less than minimum wage. A monthly transit pass was around like $120 for an adult. That was a lot of money for me.
It was, and actually, I remember when I had first moved to the city, I think my pass was around $90, and then,
Mhm.
yeah, by the time I left the city 5 years later, like, it was well over $120, and I think it depended if you were, like, a student or not, but it was upwards of almost, like, 150, I think,
Mhm.
per month. Like,
Mhm.
that's a lot of money for
That
someone who's just
is.
working minimum wage job or they're a student.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's the thing is, like, you do get a bit of a like, you there is a bit of a break, I remember, for, like, a student,
Not
but
much.
then once you're working, it's goes up, and you're just like, "Alright, that's fun."
Yep,
But,
exactly.
yeah, what's your next one?
So my next one, this one, I don't know if it's a grievance, but it's always the advice is talking about the stock market.
Oh, yeah.
And granted, I understand. Like, I understand people who are fortunate enough to have their money invested. There's going to
Mhm.
be anxiety about what is happening there.
Mhm.
But I feel like the larger population doesn't even have investments. Like, they don't even have the luxury of that.
They don't have enough money put
E
aside to make opening an investment account worthwhile.
Exactly. So, this is where it's always just like that was the same advice I kept finding. It was just stock market, you know. It's just a little bit out of reach for so many people. So, I
And also that goes back to just financial education in general.
yeah,
A lot of people are not financially literate and don't understand or maybe like don't understand fully how the stock market really is reacts to people's emotions. You know,
exactly.
everyone's feeling good, it's doing good. Oh, we're scared, it's doing bad.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'll give you the cliff notes if you are anxious about the stock market. Just some
Mhm.
realities about it. Things go up and things go down.
Yes, they do.
You're just going to ride the wave, especially if you're in there long term. Just ride it.
Things be going back up.
Yeah, exactly. It's very natural to have negative reactions when the world is going through negative events. So
Yes.
just acknowledge that. Always have your plan and stick to it. Dollar cost averaging over 40 years is a lot better
Mhm.
than trying to time the market. One weird advice I found was that worry can motivate you.
That's true.
I understood. I understand that.
I see where that comes from.
Yeah,
It's it motivates you to take those action steps.
exactly. And like maybe be a little bit risk adverse at some
Mhm.
times, and then when things are good, you could be a little bit more risky.
100%. I agree with that. Before we close out, let's just move into some tips on just coping with financial anxiety on an emotional basis because I feel like we that's really what we can do right now, but also a couple, just like tips that can help get you out of that place. The first one being remember that nothing lasts forever. This too shall pass. You know,
Mhm.
crazy things happen in the world, things are going nuts, but eventually we will make it to the other side. And in the similar vein, remember that you are not alone and it's okay to reach out to your support system. I mean, Laura, you and I talk about this like every
Oh,
day
yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, like that's kind of the thing is a lot of the time when you reach out to your friends and such, they are most likely feeling the same way
Mhm. Yeah,
as you.
there's comfort in struggling together.
Definitely. And don't compare yourself to others and their apparent wealth on social media.
Ooh, good one.
This has been huge for me lately because it just seems like everybody is going to Europe. And I'm just like, how? How are you going to Europe right now? So, yeah, that's definitely a big one. And then, you've kind of touched on this, but look up some educational content online or maybe read some books that can help build up your own knowledge about personal finance. And if the anxiety is persistent, no matter the circumstance, all throughout life, like, if it was like this 3 years ago, if a few years from now you look back and you're like, I'm still feeling like this, don't be afraid to seek out professional help
Mhm.
or therapy because there might be an internalized anxiety that you just need to figure out,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
that's very true. One of the, talks I came across was with a, therapist, and
Yep.
she dealt with a lot of people suffering from anxiety, and it wasn't just financial anxiety, it was all types of different anxiety, and, like, they actually needed professional help, so this is
Yes.
something you shouldn't have to fight alone. There's resources like BetterHelp out there, or just, seeking someone in your town or city.
Hmm. For sure. And I think just from like a practical place, I think it's just taking a step forward in any way possible. So whether that is putting something towards savings wherever you can, even if it's like just $10.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this sometimes where it's just like, okay, I have to pay for this, 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 and this. I have this little bit left over. Okay, put it into savings, you know, because that makes you feel like you've at least done something to take control of that situation. And also start with attainable goals and don't try to climb Mount Everest right away. And then my last one really here would be just reduce impulse spending and try to make it harder to do. We've talked about this before. If you know that when you're feeling a little bit bored or having some feelings, I like to go into the Sephora website. And it's a bad thing that my credit card is saved on the Sephora website. Just in speaking from experience here, where when I have been feeling very financially anxious, even during this time where I feel like I don't have as much available, I will still every so often just be like, ooh, shoes, or ooh, Sephora. And, that's just really kind of feels good in the moment because you're like, oh, I'm treating myself. But then I'm just going to feel more anxious about it later. So if you can reduce those impulse purchases, would recommend that as well.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice, and, like, one thing I would always do is if I felt like I was like, "Oh, I need to buy something," um,
Mhm.
I would put it all in the shopping cart, but then I, like, wouldn't hit checkout. I would wait
Yes.
and give myself, like, 24 hours or a couple days, and 9 times out of 10, I totally forgot about it. So that was just one way that kinda helped me not go into, like, trigger spending. So, yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Hopefully, there was some little tidbit of advice in there if you are feeling financially anxious or it was just us complaining. We're not sure.
This was going back to, like, our millennial episode. We don't have a lot of solutions, but we do have suggestions. Some things to talk about.
Yes, exactly. A lot of things are just a systemic problem
Yes.
that, we cannot fix ourselves.
Yes.
So, if anyone
But
else
we
has
can
some tips, let us know.
tear up about it in a group.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes. You know, going back to that, reaching out to your community and your support system.
Yeah, we are happy to be a support system here for you. You can always email us
Yes.
at teawithlaurarachele@gmail.com.
Yes, we would be happy to chat with you. And I mean, like, I thought that this was a really interesting topic. So, if any of our listeners have a story about financial anxiety, just if there's been anything that you've done that's helped and you have something you want to share, let us know. We would love to have you on as a future guest.
Absolutely, and, if you have any
Yeah,
tips as well of how you overcame it, come tell us.
would love to hear
We
it.
need
Please.
your knowledge.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So, if you feel called to, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and a 5-star rating on Spotify. It really helps out the show, so we would very much appreciate it. And like Laura said, you can email us at teawithlaurarachele@gmail.com.
And with that, live like tea.
Live like tea.